Hello, everyone. I'm Elizabeth Abraham, Head of Customer and Partner Success for For Risk, and I wanted to welcome each of you to the virtual fireside chat where we will be talking to Jessica McDermott from Accenture about how cognitive technology is the future of compliance. This is For Risk's first session in a series related to reinforcing regulatory compliance with cognitive technology. Note that we're recording this session in order to refer to it in the future. So since this is a short 30-minute session, we will jump right into asking Jessica questions. We hope to have time at the end of the session to answer questions from the audience. So please enter your questions into the chat menu. So let's get started by introducing Jessica. We are truly privileged to have Jessica as our first guest speaker, kicking off the series. For those of you who do not know Jessica, she is a principal director within Accenture's risk and compliance function. She has over 20 years of experience in financial services and demonstrated success in driving transformational change. She has extensive experience in resolving regulatory actions, reshaping risk and control environments, delivering enterprise policy and technology change, and increasing operational efficiency. She also has areas of expertise that include enhancing controls or financial products and activities through business risk and regulatory program management. Welcome, Jessica, and thank you for taking time to share your thoughts.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
So Jessica, you and other members of the Accenture team recently published a compliance risk study called Can Compliance Keep Up with Warp Change Speed? Can you tell us a little bit about the survey?
Absolutely. We produce this survey on an annual basis, and this year's survey was even broader than we would normally do, which typically focused on financial services. And this year we went out to 860 compliance executives across 15 countries in 10 different industries to get a broader landscape of what are the challenges that compliance executives are facing today. And it confirmed our hypothesis that, in fact, compliance functions across the globe are facing more complex challenges and accelerated transformation more than we've ever seen. And the reason for this is that we're seeing increase in regulatory activity. We also know that there's a great deal of pressure on companies today from their investors to see that their values align to investors and stakeholder values. And so I think a lot of this puts that pressure on our compliance executives as they try to navigate the accelerating pace of change. The other, and we're going to talk about this in detail today, is again, technology is also changing very rapidly. And compliance executives are having to deal with perhaps looking at the skill sets of their teams and making sure that they've got the right people in the right seats with the right skills to help navigate those changes in technology, both to take advantage of them and to deal with this disruption or the potential risks that they introduce to a firm.
Thank you. So what risks did you find that the executives are most concerned about facing in the next couple of years?
Right. I mean, of course, there are so many risks out there today that executives face, but we focused on the top three that we found. One was the cybersecurity, which was the greatest challenge today for the majority of our respondents. And I think our respondents really stressed that this heightened challenge of cybersecurity and how they manage those risks. For some compliance officers, the CISO reports into them. And so that is part of why a small portion of our respondents were also CISOs or compliance officers on behalf of CISOs, which are the Chief Information Security Officer, sorry to use the acronym, um, and that that this cybersecurity challenge is one that they face both from a regulatory standpoint, so regulators are implementing new rules around this, but also just the state of the world. So we saw with the pandemic when the majority of the workforce worked from home and they had to deal with remote working and how to protect the company's data, making sure that they were aligned around security practices generally. And so this is one of the key areas of function. The next one is ESG, which I would say would be the greatest compliance challenge over the next 2 years. And in this area, we see evolving regulations coming out. We have the climate change related to greenhouse gas emissions, also workplace safety related to human rights, and or diversity is another topic that many investors and companies are looking for companies to come out and take a stance on, right? So they want to make sure that the companies that they're investing in, as well as employees, the companies that they work for, have the same values related to climate risk, to diversity, and to the safety and security of their people. And one of the areas we most work with compliance executives on is around executive compensation and aligning that to these values. So these are areas, and we see regulators as well coming out with regulations around executive compensation to ensure that firms are acting in the best interest of their investors.
Um,
ESG is going to be a hot topic for many years to come. And I think it's additional challenges for our compliance executives to kind of deal with those, that evolving, and to partner with the C-suite in those discussions to really set business strategy as it relates to the ESG topic. And the last major risk is around privacy. And this one we've seen over the last 2 years, and it continues to be a risk that they focus on looking forward. So we have respondents have noted that the privacy just remains one of their top priorities. And it's the data privacy structure that they're putting in place, emerging regulations in this space that they have to stay on top of, how they're making it a priority for their infrastructure, and how they classify data, manage that regulatory change related to privacy rules as well. So all of those are top of mind for compliance executives. And as a result, I think with all of that change, and one of the other really interesting elements of the respondents said that they expected costs for compliance to increase by 30%, but no increase in budget. And so how do you deal with these emerging risks when you're not getting increased budget, but you have the increase in costs? And so this is really the challenge that I think puts pressure on compliance executives today.
Thanks for that. Um, do the priority concerns change when you're looking across industries?
Surprisingly not, although we did see, again, we had surveyed the 860 respondents were across 10 industries. And what was interesting about that is we saw different levels of maturity and compliance risk management across those industries. But the three risks that I mentioned, ESG, privacy, and cybersecurity, were pervasive across all industries and really top of mind for all of the compliance executives. So I find that one of the things that we can do is leverage from those industries that are more mature in their compliance risk management techniques, for the other industries that are kind of having to deal with these emerging regulations. We know, for example, that financial services firms have been under pressure from regulators for many years, since the 2008 crisis. And coming out of that, they've really put in place some very strong compliance risk practices that could be leveraged, and applied in a fit for purpose way across the other industries. And so that's, but yeah, it's interesting because compliance executives everywhere are really focused on these three topics.
That's another question. You look to see, is it critical for the C-suite to be proactive and engage in the compliance strategy? And does that change the culture of compliance?
Um, I would say that over the years, this glo complex global regulatory and enforcement agenda has really put an importance on the regulatory and compliance functions within a firm. What we are seeing is that the CCOs are playing a vital role in the executive committee in sort of driving that discussion around those risks and helping to position the firm to face those risks in a way in front of their stakeholders and investors in the best way possible. And so they've really become a partner. I think we were looking back at some of the other surveys we've done where chief compliance officers may have been slightly removed from the C-suite. Again, that's the executive committee, the chief executive committee. And what we are seeing now is, in fact, they have decidedly a role at the table today in driving the strategy, and that they are helping to position the conversation around the firm's strategy in ESG, the firm's strategy in data privacy, how they're putting diversity as a priority for the firm, and really making sure that there's a culture of conduct throughout the firm, and that being compliant with regulatory obligations is everyone's job. 90% of the compliance risk respondents agreed that the responsibilities that once were, within the second line function or the compliance function are now being shifted towards the business or what we call the first line function. So that's interesting because that shift of roles and responsibilities and risk ownership does change. Now, we've seen that in the financial services industry. So we did see that some of the other industries that haven't really shifted risk ownership to the business, that they are a little lagging in that. But what it does is it helps ensure that as firms bring products and services to the market, that they're doing it through the lens of compliance, and they're doing it through a lens of a culture that really instills that the values that the firm has set out around those compliance initiatives.
Got it. And what are the main benefits of the cross-enterprise participation in regulatory change activities?
I think above all, we see that it's a shared responsibility, right? And so as we build that cross collaboration and we nurture that culture of compliance, one of the things that comes out of that is that shared responsibility across all of the areas of the firm. And I think that's just it sets firms up for really giving the compliance the stature that they need to do the proper challenge and monitoring that they need to do to ensure compliance. It also demonstrates to other external stakeholders, such as regulators, that the firm is committed to their compliance agenda, and that it's not just the chief compliance officer, but in fact the entire C-suite who plays an important role in that.
Thank you. Um, How are businesses changing to be able to respond faster to these shifts in the regulatory landscape?
Um, as we talk to compliance executives, and many of the respondents, more than half actually, said that they're turning to data and to data-driven insights. And so actually 52% said that they lack data today, but they know that they need to invest in data for the future. Um, and so I think it's really about having um, that focus on data-driven insights to really capture what's important to the business, where are the weaknesses across the firm, where are there inconsistent processes, um, and having that be really data driven so that the compliance officers can be focused on the weak areas of the firm.
And what advantages are companies seeing by incorporating cognitive technology into their compliance programs?
So we're seeing is, and actually 93% of the respondents responded that they thought artificial intelligence was going to play an important role in compliance management in the future. And the ways we're seeing that being leveraged across firms is to really connect that data. So we talked about having data-driven insights. The way you do that is by linking that data together and connecting it. But that can be a very onerous topic when we're talking about thousands of regulations and control libraries. So how do you link your regulatory library and your control library together? How do you ensure your policies are comprehensive and they cover all of your regulatory obligations? Leveraging cognitive artificial intelligence can help do that in an automated way. Instead of spending hours laboring over Excel spreadsheets or PDF documents and trying to correlate a policy to a regulation, firms now can leverage cognitive artificial intelligence, which has advanced so much in recent years, to help them do that analysis and actually come up with an impact assessment on the regulation and what its impact to the firm would be in a very timely way.
Great, thank you. So Jessica, we do have a question from the audience. So Rakesh has a question about due to the increased scrutiny of internal and external stakeholders, what strong role DPA and SOC 2, 3 are playing in that, and can AI help in the compliance matter?
Um, Probably 4C Risk can answer more on SOC 2, but as I know it's a SOC 2 compliant tool. But in terms of ensuring that that there are that the security protocols are in place and that the right controls are in place, the way I think compliance and AI can help is this. If you have a cybersecurity or information security policy that's standard for the firm, and then new regulations are coming out in various jurisdictions, what AI can do is take your policy and compare it against the regulations and let you know where there might be weaknesses in your policy. So which policy statements are not fully covered by your, or which regulatory obligations are not fully covered by your policy statements. And that's really how artificial intelligence can help you know that. And then further to your SOC 2 protocols or any data privacy, data security type protocols that you have in place, you could map those controls to those policy statements, and that will help as well.
Exactly. Okay, thank you. I don't see any other questions from the audience at the moment. So, from this discussion today, it's clear that cognitive technology will play a significant role in creating next generation technology oriented GRC initiatives and in setting the foundation for compliance programs to thrive in the future. So again, thank you so much, Jessica, for sharing your time with all of us today. And I think there may be, and one more question, sorry, we'll take that. Are there specific concerns, Jessica, that you're hearing from financial firms about adopting cognitive technology?
I think the only concern that I've heard from financial services firms is the time it would take to get it through their model risk management approval process to validate the model. And so, I think that that's something that Accenture can certainly help with. We've done that with 4C risk. We've discussed that. So how can we help validate the AI model within the model risk management framework in a timely way? To give you an idea of that, right? One of the main things that we can do is if there's a time that the firm needs to evaluate the model, Accenture can run the model in the background and do a lot of the professional services or managed services. And in that, the firm can take time to evaluate the model and also see the results of it and the effectiveness of it. To give an example, we had a team trying to, I think the case study was 1,400 regulatory obligations, regulatory requirements that we had to map to, I think it was in the thousands of controls. And leveraging 4C risk, we were able to do that within 4 to 6 weeks, 3 iterations, which is really a phenomenal turnaround. I think one of the concerns I had from one financial services client is, well, we've been down this AI road before, and it's just been really challenging because it takes months and months to train the AI model to actually work. And in fact, because of the way 4C risk has built this tool, it almost self-trains. And so our ability to make very incredible progress in a very short amount of time. I think within 4 to 6 weeks, we had it up to 72% accurate or 72% accurate matching across 1,400 controls for those policy or regulatory requirements. And all I can say is, having worked within banks for the last 20 years, that is phenomenal to have a regulatory library with parsed out regulatory obligations that you can link to your controls and policy statements and know with confidence, if you're a CRO or a CCO, that when a regulator comes in for exam, you could say, here are my policies and my policy statements related to that regulatory obligation. And here are the controls that demonstrate to you that we comply. And that's just a very powerful place for a chief executive to be in.
Absolutely. We have another question. How's the pace of adoption in the mid-market businesses versus large enterprises?
I would say that mid-market businesses, especially relatively newer banks, and as we see some of the neobanks spin up or digital banking, they're very open to leveraging artificial intelligence to help them navigate these challenges. Probably a little bit more so than some of the traditional bulge bracket banks. But having said that, we've had so much interest across the board in leveraging cognitive AI to help with the manual process of compliance. And I think it's just going to be the future of compliance, really, because having thousands of people pour through hundreds and hundreds of regulatory requirements and try to map that through to policies and controls to ensure and have the kind of data that they need to demonstrate compliance, technology is going to have to play a role in that.
Thank you. Another question, can you share your vision as to what you would like to see the reg change process evolve in about, 5 or so years?
Fully STP. Yeah, I mean, of course, as a former practitioner before I became a consultant, I did have a dream for like that end-to-end view, right? And so at one point, I remember a bank, they would get something like 700 alerts a month, and only 30 of them needed to be actioned. So having an ingestion of regulatory change, new regulations, changes to regulations, regulatory news, and being able to cut out the noise and focus on what's important, be able to route it to the people in the firm and which departments that's important for, to have transparency across the firm through a workflow tool of what all of, where we are in our compliance and our implementation. Maybe even connecting it all the way down to Jira or an action tracker for transparency to IT, right? If I'm an IT professional, I don't want to be the last to know about regulatory changes. It's impossible to allocate my resources and budget to that. And so it's just that transparency from intake through to the impact assessment, all the way down to my operations and IT professionals who may have to make infrastructure and process changes to be in compliance. Yeah.
One more question. I think we can take this one more and then we'll have to close for the day. So if there's one manual process or step in the regulatory change process, what do you think automation has the most value and why?
Definitely the impact assessment. That ability to link your regulations library with the controls and the policies libraries. And then when a regulatory change comes in, to have almost an automated impact assessment about what you need to update in your policies, your procedures, and in your controls. So that, and in a very organized way, that you have this action plan that comes out of that impact assessment, that you know who's working on what, and you have full transparency to ensure regulatory compliance by regulatory deadlines, I think would be one of the biggest and most important steps within that process that cognitive artificial intelligence can help with.
Great. Thank you again, Jessica.
I'm
And
sorry for the meowing cat, if anyone heard my cat in the background.
we couldn't hear.
Okay.
We couldn't hear. Yeah. And so thank you, Jessica, and thanks
My
to all the
pleasure.
participants today. We hope this session was beneficial, and a tremendous thanks for you joining. We will send the recording of the session along with a summary transcript in the upcoming days. While we're here, I did want to put a plug in for our next Fireside Chat, July 20th, where we will be having the honor of discussing measuring and maintaining improves visibility into your InfoSec posture. And our guest speaker for that session will be Christine Horvega from CGI. So we look forward to hearing from all of you in the future and assisting you with strengthening your compliance program. Have a wonderful day or evening. Goodbye.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Bye-bye.
Thank you.